Edmund Stanley, the preacher on the Lutheran Hour for many years, once noted that back in England at the opening of the 15th century, an order of monks at a priory called the Star of Bethlehem began to take in patients, and in time became the Bethlehem Hospital in London, the first lunatic asylum, as they called it back then. But over the years, Bethlehem became shortened and slurred into Bedlam. And Bedlam thus became the name for any lunatic asylum, and thence to a name for wild uproar and confusion. And so, from Bethlehem to Bedlam. And according to Matthew, that's exactly the way the story goes. From silent night, holy night. We go to the lunatic fury and murderous rage of Herod. From all is calm, all is bright. We go to the wise men escaping through the darkness of the night with no bright star to guide them. Mothers and fathers weeping in horror and grief at the death of their children at the hands of Herod's henchmen. And Mary and Joseph taking the babe and running for their lives. And so, from Bethlehem to Bedlam. And that's the way the stories go in our lives too, Steinley points out. We too go from Bethlehem to Bedlam in many respects. By the quirk of a calendar, every year we go from Christmas Eve to New Year's Eve. We go from the quiet serenity of a Christmas Eve to the wild bedlam of a New Year's Eve. Did you have any bedlam? Wild bedlam last night? Okay. But we also go from Bethlehem to Bedlam in another sense. Perhaps we managed to experience a moment or two of peace on a Christmas Eve, and then suddenly it's back to the bedlam of our jobs or families or lives. And back to this madhouse of a world in which violence still claims the lives of innocent children day after day, in which wars continue to rage, in which refugees still run for their lives. And back to all the other things we could name, the murder and mayhem we see on the news or hear about every day. And there is no star to guide us, to help us find our way. It's the way the story goes. And so where does that leave us? I mean, what are we to do? Are we simply, as I was talking in the children's room, box up our hopes like we do the lights and Christmas ornaments and store them away for another year? In a madhouse of a world, in the madhouse that is often our lives, how do we live with hope and peace? What of peace? Well, go back to the stories of the birth of Jesus and what they tell us. Luke tells us of a bewildered and confused Mary, tells us of a couple of country bumpkins far from home, not even a place for them at the inn. God drawing near, not in a palace or in a temple. Christ coming to birth amidst straw and cattle and dung in a manger for a crib. And Matthew tells us pretty much the same thing. Christ is born amidst a threatened divorce, to a man torn by doubts, to a couple barely hanging together by a thread. And he comes to birth in a world in which violence threatens little children, a world in which Herod stalks. What the stories tell us is that Christ was born not in temple, not in church. He wasn't born in the sacred places, but down an alley, in a dump of a barn, in a stable. He was found in an everyday, unholy place, among everyday people, with life at its most real. And what the stories tell us is that's where Christ continues to be found, in the midst of everyday life, as it really is, where people struggle with doubts or hanging on by a thread, where people are in need of hope, where people are burdened down, where spirits are wearied by it all, where people know what it means to be far from home. far from peace, joy, in a world in which Christ and the things of God often threaten the powers that be, a world in great need of kindness. That's where the wondrous gift is given, in very real lives, wherever people most need Christ to be born. And that is our hope and our peace in a madhouse of a world, in madhouse lives. As Steinley puts it, peace is not the absence of conflict, but rather the assurance of a presence. It's what children know. In a fierce storm, what gives them peace? The presence of someone they love holding them. It's not much different with adults either, I'll tell you. What carries us through a lot of storms is the presence of those we love, the assurance of that presence. And that's what the Christmas stories proclaim. God is with us. God is with us not simply where things are calm and bright, and not simply where life is all under control and all is prepared. Not simply in all those places marked as holy. God is with us at any place and time, where nothing much is calm and much is dark, where there is brokenness and need for healing and help. And to look for God in those places and times, to trust God's presence, and hold fast to God's love in the midst of the lunacy, is to know peace, even when things seem to be coming apart at the seams, and hope. It's the peace and hope of knowing we're not alone. God is with us. But there's something more. Another author has written this: are there in us, in you and me now, that recklessness of the loving heart, that wild courage, that crazy gladness in the face of darkness and death, that shuddering faithfulness, even unto the end of the world, through which new things can come to pass? Are there in us such qualities as these, which are in fact themselves the first glimmerings of new things that even now are beginning to come to pass? And that too is what the Christmas stories proclaim. God has come unto us not only to be with us, but also to bring to birth within and through us the new things God wants for this earth. That's how it happens. God brings peace and hope and joy to birth through you and me as we live in this madhouse of the world with a wild love, a crazy courage, a lunatic faith that sees God at work in the chaos and darkness, that continues to labor to bring to birth kindness and compassion no matter what. A madhouse faith that labors for peace, brings an end to the violence that consumes the children, brings to birth hope for the children. That is our faith, that in God's love and power, we in this earth can be delivered unto wholeness and truth and life. And so from Bethlehem to Bedlam, it's the way it goes. But we can go from Bethlehem through Bedlam with peace and hope if we keep looking for God in the unholy places, in every moment and place, in everyday places, even your life and mine, and live with a lunatic faith that trusts God's love and purpose and leads us to all we should be as God's people. Amen. Amen.